I came across this case, and it stood out immediately. A respected woman, well to do, connected, accused of quietly destroying other people's lives. Not through violence, not through force, but through anonymous letters. A newspaper at the time described it like this: the famous poison pen case, involving some of the leading wealthy society people in this section, gained wide notoriety because of its sensational features. And another report put it even more bluntly: these letters are either the result of willful criminality or the work of a diseased mind. Now imagine this. You're living your life, going about your normal routine, and suddenly, plans are canceled, messages are delivered, decisions are made, all without your knowledge. A woman named Mrs. Jones would later report that this was happening to her, which resulted in their canceling or neglecting some social engagement previously made. And then, something even worse. Mrs. Jones would sometimes go to the phone and have poured into her ear a torrent of scandal. A voice, hidden. The speaker always spoke in a disguised voice, untraceable, unseen. And that was only the beginning. Let's go back in time. Elizabeth, New Jersey, early 1900s. A growing American city, tree-lined streets, horse-drawn carriages slowly giving way to early automobiles, church bells marking the hours of the day, social clubs, community gatherings, a structured society where people knew one another and where reputation mattered. This was not a place of anonymity. This was a place where a person's standing in the community defined how they were seen. And in a place like this, information traveled quickly. Not through social media, but through conversations, letters, and whispers. By the summer of 1913, newspapers began reporting on what had already been happening. From The Sun, June 24, 1913. Poison pen writers flee Jersey town. New evidence said to indicate that Mrs. Pollard was not the author. At this stage, the case was not clear. There were accusations, there were denials, and there was confusion. The same article stated, "The poison pen case has kept Elizabeth in a ferment." That word, ferment, describes a city in unrest, a slow building tension beneath the surface, and at the center of it was a woman, Mrs. Anna J. Pollard. At this point, she was not yet fully defined in detail in early reports, but later reporting would describe her clearly. From the Richmond Times-Dispatch, January 24, 1915. In the charming little city of Elizabeth, New Jersey, nobody had better social standing than Mrs. Anna J. Pollard. She was in comfortable circumstances, lived on the fashionable residential avenue, was prominent in the Daughters of the American Revolution, and a leader in all the clubs and societies. The Daughters of the American Revolution, often called the DAR, was a respected organization made up of women who could trace their ancestry to the American Revolution. Membership itself required lineage and status. So based on that description, it is reasonable to assume this was not a woman on the margins of society. She was at its center, respected, connected, well known. Now bring the timeline back to 1913. At this moment, the public does not yet see her as guilty. In fact, newspapers present competing narratives. From The Sun, she is innocent and that they have discovered the guilty persons. And then, the letters were written not by Mrs. Pollard, but by another well-known woman, who has since found it convenient to leave not only the city and state, but the country as well. And further, both are unmarried and are described as gossipy spinsters. So the story shifts, blame moves, the narrative changes. So the question became, who was really behind the letters? Mrs. Pollard herself becomes part of the investigation. She has joined with certain of her friends in doing detective work on her own account. The discovery of the real author was due to Mrs. Pollard. She is not only denying the accusations, she is actively trying to prove them wrong. She insisted that it would be necessary in order to clear her in the eyes of her neighbors. At the same time, another theory appears. Mrs. Pollard was the victim of a plot, designed not only to annoy Mrs. Jones, but to bring some of her acquaintances into disrepute. So now there are multiple possibilities. She is guilty, she is innocent, she is being framed, someone else is responsible. And all of this is unfolding in a city where reputation defines everything. A damaged reputation didn't just cause embarrassment, it could affect friendships, marriages, and social standing for years. September 20th, 1913. The case shifts from rumor to the legal system. From the Bear Daily Times, September 20th, 1913. Woman is held for poison pin. Mrs. Nelson L. Pollard was formally held for the Union County Grand Jury yesterday. This is no longer speculation. This is official. Her bail, which had been furnished by her husband, was continued. Her husband plays a direct role here. He provides bail, keeps her out of custody, ensures she remains free while the case moves forward. This detail matters because it shows she had support, both socially and financially. The article continues. Mrs. Pollard was under bail and also under bail to answer to the United States Grand Jury. So there are multiple layers of legal pressure, state charges, federal involvement. The case will be laid before the October Grand Jury. And yet, there is still no immediate resolution. The case was heard upward of a month ago, but no decision was announced. The city waits. Weeks pass. No answers. And the accusations remain direct. Mrs. Charles F. Jones accuses Mrs. Pollard. And as the case moved forward, reports described the social world as split in two over the poison pin case, neighbor against neighbor. Reports from the time also noted that Mrs. Jones's sister, Mrs. John Livingood, was involved as a witness in the trial, further showing how closely connected the people in this case were. And the nature of the letters is clearly stated. The poisoned pin letters cast aspersions upon the character of various persons. These were not harmless messages. They were attacks on reputation, on identity. And in a place like Elizabeth, that kind of damage spreads quickly. Let us pause for a minute. In today's terms, this would be like someone spreading damaging claims online, except in this case, there was no way to trace it. And this is where the case becomes more than just letters, because according to later reports, the harassment did not stay the same. It evolved. Deliveries began to arrive. Groceries, dry goods, and other merchandise had never been ordered, were frequently delivered. Ordered by someone else. The same had been ordered over the telephone. This wasn't random. This was organized. And based on this pattern, it seems reasonable to assume someone was deliberately interfering with daily life, not just reputations, but routines. Then came one of the strangest incidents, a newspaper advertisement. Wanted, a female cat will pay, Tom Jones, 242 Orchard Street. At first glance, harmless, but the result was anything but. For days, people arrived with female cats. People showed up, repeatedly, uninvited, bringing animals that had never been requested. The consequence was that the neighborhood was infested with cats of every description. This wasn't just inconvenience. This was disruption, embarrassment, public confusion. And according to reports, this was happening to Mrs. Jones and her household. It wasn't just letters. It was interference. And while this happened over 100 years ago, the pattern may feel familiar. Today, this might look like fake accounts, false messages, or online rumors spreading without a clear source. Based on this behavior, it is reasonable to assume this was not random. This suggests someone confident, someone bold enough to act repeatedly, without fear of being identified. And more importantly, someone who understood how to manipulate perception. Because that is what this was becoming. Control over perception. Control over reputation. control over reality. And still, no answers. There was complete mystery as to its ownership. For years, families lived in fear, lived in dread of what the next move might be. That word, dread, matters, because this was not just inconvenience, it was psychological. Slow, relentless, unseen. After months of delay, the case finally moved forward. March 12, 1914. The trial begins, and from the start, Mrs. Pollard indignantly denied the charges. From the New York Tribune, Mrs. Anna L. Pollard went on the witness stand and vigorously denied that she had written the scurrilous letters. "I never wrote a letter to Dr. Jones or his wife." A direct denial, but the courtroom is tense. She was very nervous on the witness stand, and the evidence is debated. Regarding the similarity of the letters, and the letters which Mrs. Pollard had written on her typewriter, experts argue. Details matter. Nothing is simple. March 13, 1914. The verdict. Poison pen jury frees Mrs. Pollard. It took the jury 5 hours to find Mrs. Pollard not guilty. 5 hours. Not immediate, not obvious. And when the verdict is reached, she is not in the courtroom. She learns of it at home. Her response is recorded. "I can't say anything now, except that I am thankful for the verdict. I feel that it was due to me." And afterward, Mrs. Pollard's friends said she and her husband purposed to sue. They are not just relieved, they are preparing to take action. The case appears finished, but it is not. October 25, 1914. The story returns. From the New York Tribune, say Mrs. Pollard admits poison pen. The poison pen case took a new turn. It was announced that the grilling was successful. After questioning, she broke down after 6 hours of severe questioning. And then, Mrs. Pollard admitted that she wrote them because of social jealousy. That explanation changes how the entire case is viewed. What had seemed like a mystery, or even a possible plot, may have come from something much simpler: resentment within the same social circles she was part of. But even at the time, her behavior stood out. From the Washington Times, October 25, 1914. The woman who presents a curious study in feminine psychology. That description is worth pausing on. A curious study. Not just a suspect, not just a defendant, but someone whose actions seemed difficult to fully explain. What would lead someone in her position, respected, connected, established, to carry this out over and over again? Was it personal conflict? Was it rivalry? Was it something that had been building quietly over time? We don't have all of those answers. And that's where it becomes worth thinking about. Because this wasn't one moment. It wasn't one letter. And the scale becomes clearer. There were more than 200 letters. Think about that for a moment. More than 200 separate actions, each one written, sent, and intended to reach someone. They had been circulated among persons of prominence. Not strangers, not random targets, people within the same social world. And the impact: widespread fear and a private scandal in society. So now the question shifts. Not just who did it, but why continue? Why repeat it, again and again, knowing the effect it was having? Based on the reports, we can make a careful assumption here. This may not have been impulsive. This may have been deliberate, sustained, and rooted in something deeper than a single moment of emotion. And that's what makes this case stand out, because it forces us to consider something uncomfortable. How far someone might go, not out of necessity, but out of perception, resentment, or something they felt needed to be said, even if it came anonymously. Even at the time, people were not just trying to solve it, they were trying to understand it. And it leaves one final question for you to think about. If you were living in that community, receiving those letters, or even hearing about them, what would you believe? So you probably think this is it. Nope, that was not the full picture. Because months later, the case is revisited again. January 24th, 1915, from the Richmond Times-Dispatch. The mystery of the poison pen letters has been thoroughly cleared up at last. But then, new details emerge. Several hundred communications of the poison pen type were circulated. Not just 200, several hundred. And the methods? Not only the use of the mails, but likewise that of the telephone and the local newspapers. Letters, phone calls, fake advertisements, all connected. And the impact? Quarrels between individuals who had no real grievance against each other. Domestic infelicity arose in many an Elizabeth household. And finally, the whole social fabric of Elizabeth was constantly being ripped and torn asunder. This was not a single act. This was a sustained campaign. The most systematic and effective campaign of mischief-making ever concocted. And one final detail, the timeline. Date back to 1908, meaning this had been happening for years, before it was fully understood. And yet, at the center of it all, nobody had better social standing than Mrs. Anna J. Pollard. That contradiction remains. A woman who was respected, trusted, and deeply connected, still tied to one of the most disruptive cases in the city's history. What remains is not just a case, but a pattern, a reminder that damage does not always come through force. Sometimes it comes through words. And once those words are believed, they cannot be undone. And even today, while the method may have changed, the idea hasn't. Anonymous words still have the power to damage lives. If you found this story interesting, if you enjoy real cases drawn from historical headlines, be sure to subscribe. There are many more stories like this, and each one tells us something about the past and the people who lived through it.